announce the next panel discussion that will be exactly discussing the money and sustainability aspect Green Finance Leaders panel. And this is a panel that, me personally, I have been really looking forward to it due to the excellent, inspiring speakers right now. So without any further ado, please help me welcome Anthony Sa, co-founder and CEO of Finoverse, accompanying him exceptionally valued speakers, Aveline San and Poman Law. Welcome.
All right. Now we're moving to the star panel. I was looking forward for this, and I'm really excited to share the stage, very honored with two remarkable leaders in green finance technology who are truly, truly passionate about this topic. I'm looking forward for this conversation, and I'd like to just jump in straight into the point, up to the point. Maybe perhaps we start with Poman Law. She's the founder of Institute of Sustainability and Technology, and of course, a very known figure in Hong Kong who is advocating for green sustainability. You mentioned previously a couple of times that soon green finance we will stop calling it green finance, it will just become a finance, it's just become inevitable. When is gonna happen?
I think very soon. I'm very hopeful. You know, a lot of people think the world is doomed, but just the fact that we are having just so many green events in Hong Kong in a week, I think this is probably, I can't even remember how the probably nth event I've been invited to speak at. And I just love being an evangelist because I do really want everyone to know about the urgency. And, you know, since I first launched the first carbon neutral hotel 13 years ago, to now, the world has changed. You know, sustainability is simply at the top of the global agenda. And it's hard to read a newspaper without coming across that word multiple times. So I think everyone is crystal clear about the urgency. And I do see sincere commitment from all sectors to drive this transition. And in the banking space, I don't think I've met a single bank who doesn't put sustainability at the top as a core strategy, a core pillar going forward. So I do believe that, you know, all loans, there will no longer be any green loans because all loans will be green and all buildings eventually have to be turned green.
Fantastic, and we have actually a banker in the room, Aveline San, the CEO and head of banking for Citi in Hong Kong and Macau. So back to question from Poman, I guess, remark, when we will have the green as a core for banking, and maybe you can share with us what Citi does in this direction.
Thank you, and I totally agree with Poman. We've moved a long way in the last 10 years from the time when people were being convinced, they still had to be convinced on the importance and the urgency of it, till now everyone is hopping onto what kind of technology that can be used to aid all the life cycle of being in the green finance all throughout to the project phase. So this is something which Citibank has been very much taking high priority of. So in 2020, we announced our commitment of a new updated sustainable strategy, whereby we committed $1 trillion for a sustainable finance goal. And we are looking also to partner with a lot of policy makers, our green tech partners, to make this happen. And there are three pillars to how we enable this. One, of course, as a lender, as a bank, we would want to be deploying that sustainable finance, the 1 trillion I mentioned, towards low carbon solutions. But we also have a lot of clients who are on this journey who need our help to help them measure, help them manage, and also reduce their carbon emissions and also the impact of climate risk. And the third part is really ourselves, how we as a bank can be also responsible in reducing our own company's scope 1 to 3 emissions. So all these are very much in progress. And I think in 2020 to 2022 alone, these 2 years, we have already reduced or committed $348 million billion dollars towards that goal. I think in the recent year, there's much more progress in terms of that technology partnership. So this morning I was speaking at the Climate Business Forum, and those who were there, so my apologies if I heard my stories again, because I was so excited by these examples. We have been in a number of partnerships, and one that we just announced last week was how we work with a Singapore decarbonization tech company called Finoverse, and they provided a platform whereby we can have tech companies or other green companies purchasing voluntary carbon credits from Citi's portfolio. So whilst we were enabling them, funding them, we were also able to arrange for that transfer of the voluntary carbon credit on that platform with linked to carbon emissions. So that is a new way of scaling this effort. We also think another example in the US, and I think the last panel also mentioned some European or other US jurisdictions had a bit more traction in that deployment of technology. And that's the case that I've seen in America, where Citi has also been partnering with Infineon and American Airlines on some of the e-fuels initiatives. So for the sustainable aviation fuel solutions, we were able to have some of those Infineon kind of conversion from the brownfield project. And by funding that, we are also in agreement with America to also transfer some of those carbon credits back to us. So we also reduce our scope 1 to scope 3 emission as well. So yeah, there are lots of very innovative collaboration across the industry with a lot of these good examples.
Fantastic, and we will dive into a little bit more specific use cases a little bit later. But before that, Poman, I would like to ask you a little bit, maybe a couple of steps back. A few years back, you were the first company in Hong Kong that introduced the carbon neutral hotel. I'm wondering, in kind of a traditional family business setting, what was the most kind of difficult or kind of challenge to turn things around internally and to make this happen? Can you walk us through, please?
I think it's probably not just a family business, or I would say it's any business. Ultimately, I think ESG has always been seen as a cost, or at most a marketing strategy. Because I think in the past, it used to be the marketing and corporate communications department that handled ESG. So it's mainly through CSR projects, through promotions, and also the fact that, you know, we are heading some serious economic headwinds along with rising interest rates. And then, you know, we were hit with COVID, so unprecedented challenges. So, you know, when every company is in like a survival mode, they will be like, okay, this is like the least of our top priority. But in fact, what we need to realize is that we are all in this together. So the question is, how can we actually turn this transition risk, these challenges, into opportunities, into investment opportunities? And sometimes I always remind others to think of just 20 years ago, you know, technology was something that not every company was able to seize as a window of opportunity. And for those companies that fail to leverage technology, that fail to transform digitally, they became dinosaurs, just like Kodak. So I think for companies now, if we fail to take ESG risks properly and manage them, if we fail to embrace impact and ESG as a corporate strategy, if we don't take that into consideration in every business decision formula, I think we'll become the next Kodak. So it needs to be seen as you know, part of the equation, Before it used to be just risk and return. Now I'm saying, for this to really kickstart this impact revolution, for humanity to survive, we need to include impact into the equation. And I think that's what I've been trying to do, whether it be it our own internal strategy. I think it's important that we see it, we see impact and ESG as alpha generating rather than just a cost.
And I think the good work that you have done, Poman, is really showing results as well. A lot of the corporates that you've been close with, or people that I've been talking to in my clientele, I think they are going through that transformation right now. A lot of them are actually starting to see the actual deployment, actual change, being more green as a competitive advantage, not only as a marketing campaign, but some of them are already incorporating this in their financial and business planning, moving their business operations, taking into account the climate risk, for example. And I think that is much more applaudable than producing a 200-page report, right? The acting on it part is really important.
It's all about, turning dialogue, all this kind of, discussions into real actions, and drive actionable solutions for our most pressing challenges. And from that, I have no doubt that we'll be able to find return on the bottom line.
Well, I also see, Poman, that it brings some sort of fruits already with the announcement of Regal Hotels and partnership with Saudi Arabia with a $5 billion project of building 30 carbon neutral hotels across the country. I'm wondering, how do you see this project going to be in life with the fact that actually a big part of financing in Saudi comes from oil, traditional industry?
So when I went to Saudi with the chief executive last year, I was really impressed with their Saudi Vision 2030, because they don't just talk about it. They put money into where their mouth is by investing heavily into all these giga projects, and all of them have net zero as a target. And honestly, when I was in Davos, I went to see the NEOM immersive experience. And there is this huge screen that actually shows you real time exactly what is being built. And it was jaw-dropping, because just a year ago, I could see certain areas were just completely barren, desert land. And then the next year, you have all these just extremely impressive structures. And the bold adoption of green innovations to really drive that transition to decarbonize their operations. So that's very touching. And they also share our vision of, embracing technology to take hospitality to the next level, and to actually be a pioneer in green hospitality. Because I do believe that a few years from now, with all the Fortune 500 companies setting net zero targets, with almost 100 countries have committing to net zero, a lot of corporate travel will have to be green. And the next generation, I think most of them are willing to pay a slight premium for green accommodation. So that's why they were very keen to work with us to leverage on our expertise as a green hospitality provider, and also as an airport and convention hotel management company, to help them with their hospitality development.
I totally agree. And last year, we took a delegation from founders from Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan to Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Riyadh. And in Riyadh, I met my old classmate who works for NEOM, and he develops the flying taxis. And it's not a blueprint; it's actual real project. They're working on that, exactly. So, back to you, Aveline. What we can do better as Hong Kong, I know we are very strong on the green bonds and all these initiatives, but is there anything that we could do better to really push this forward from more like wishful thinking into reality in terms of green?
I do think we've come a long way and done very well in the area of green bond that you mentioned, probably best in Asia. And we're also the first for the government to organize green bonds, a lot of good innovation going around here. But I think on the day-to-day, we do see still Hong Kong not moving enough in terms of the energy transition. We probably have more to do on green buildings. A lot of the good work that Poman has been doing is not prevalent. We have a lot of buildings that are low in energy efficiency, but it's difficult. It's not easy. With the ownership of of a lot of these buildings are very disparate. They may not have the incentive, awareness, and will to go green. From a financial point of view, I think I'm more optimistic that there are more that with the government and the policymakers working together with the industry transitioning. We do need to look at some of the more successful jurisdictions who have got laws that give good tax credit to encourage energy transition. That may be something which around here we should think about too. I've got some really good clients telling me that they are actually VC clients they're looking into the GBA area, whereby there are lots of opportunities in terms of carbon storage, carbon capture, utilization. But Hong Kong as an international financial center, I know we touched on that topic before, is so well positioned to help kind of bridge that funding gap. And in terms of finding new ways to look at the risk and return, and to Poman's point as well, historically we've always been looking at measuring risk with metrics that are historically linked to historical performances. And therefore, to fund projects that are really innovative, new technology, it's been challenging for a lot of the financier because there's no demonstrable financial viability. So there must be new ways to look at these projects that will kind of encourage that capital flow. There's the money there for sure, and there's a will to invest, but how do you release that capital flow? I think it's where in Hong Kong we have a lot of good professionals who can help think of these solutions.
Thank you, Aveline. And Poman, from your perspective, you travel around the world, you see the best practices. What we're lack of in Hong Kong, what we can do to make things better?
A lot. I think it really needs a lot of cross-sector collaboration, private, public, academia, philanthropy. So in the travel sector, I think even every one of us can actually make a difference just by adopting some behavioral changes. For example, not using, towel change, not asking for towel changes every day, not having your room made up every day. That actually can save tons of gallons. Less use of plastic, less use of disposable packaging. All that can actually make a huge difference. In fact, I'm a council member of Hong Kong UST, and we find that actually sometimes it doesn't take rocket science. So there's this app that tracks the use of electricity, and just that alone was able to reduce electricity by 60% when the students were kind of encouraged to engage in friendly competition, in engaging in sustainable choices. And of course, I think it's very important that we do connect capital to empower all the innovations for a more sustainable future. Because without technology, there's no way we can catch up. And we will really kind of be doomed. And it's a kind of sad trajectory if we continue to not do anything, because the clock is ticking, and if we fail to meet the 1.5 degree limit, basically a lot of the damage in terms of biodiversity loss, in terms of damage to the earth, will be irreparable. So we do have to catch up, and again, the only way is by leveraging on technology. And we, in Hong Kong, we are in a very strategic, special position because we can really mobilize the capital to make all these innovations possible so that we can actually be reducing carbon emissions at scale and at speed, even across the toughest sectors. And Hong Kong is already, the largest green finance center in Asia. We issue more than a third of all the bonds. So we definitely already have a good start. And by leveraging on our synergies with GBA, we definitely do stand a good chance of being a global green tech hub as well.
I love your reference to that app that the students were using, because probably we were looking at the same vendor, because Citibank is also launching this year with Open API. All our consumers will be able to use that app to track how they've been spending on utility bills, their carbon footprint all over, and to gamify it, they will be competing with their friends to reduce their carbon footprint. So that may be the same app.
And it's interesting that you, both of you mentioned encouragement of public to live more sustainably. And if we put aside the financial incentive, and I know, Poman, your original background is in psychology, so we're talking about behavioral changes, right? So how we can incentivize people to really change their behavior and really minimize the impact beyond just being, financially incentivized.
Thanks for this question. It's surprising to be asked this at a FinTech event, because we do have to ask ourselves exactly why have we ended up here, right, with all this mess. And ultimately, I would say the root of the sustainability challenge is our mind. The poison is our mind, the excessive greed, the lack of compassion, and also the lack of appreciation for the interconnectedness of all. It's only because we, for some reason, feel that nature, Mother Earth, is a provider that we can take advantage of, because we feel that it's separate from us. And that's why we end up chunking all this plastic into the ocean. But in fact, if you think about it, we are made up of 80% of our body is water, right? And because we feel that we are separate from the ocean, we ended up with microplastics in our blood vessels. And actually, everything in the world is interlinked. You and myself, animals, the world. So if we could really try to think of how to foster the compassion and the wisdom, I think that is the key to solving the sustainability challenges. And that's also the key to true sustainable well-being, rather than kind of being on this hedonic treadmill trying to fool ourselves to feel that by owning more, by buying more, we'd be happier. In fact, that's not the case. We can never find happiness, true happiness, outside of ourselves. It can only be found within.
I love this philosophical twist a little bit in the conversation, but if we, for a second, come back to the reality and you mentioned, both of you, the importance of capital, and we have quite a few founders here in the room who are developing solutions, technologies that they're looking for, working with financial institutions. They're looking for capital, and I know, Poman, you're running another VC fund that focusing specifically in this vertical. What are you mostly looking at? What is the most exciting technologies or applications that you think that are most important to invest right now?
We have a ventures arm at Citi Ventures. We also have a Citi Impact Fund that recently have also increased the size of. But we do look at a broad range of different green solutions that can help us and our clients in a synergetic way to move forward together. So there were quite a lot of climate mitigating resilience solutions, but increasingly adaptation solutions are something that we're looking at. So for example, there's one, I can probably quote the name, called Vibrant Planet that we recently invested in, that is a SaaS platform that can provide an operating system for forest restorations. And that's been really innovative, and we really like that. We also invested into some of the more behavioral changing applications that can be more broadly used by consumers. That app we talked about on kind of gamifying your tracking of carbon footprint. We also invested in that. And also we have a number of examples where we would be looking at how in Africa we can make more impact. Because when we look at funding gap, actually, those places where we have the largest funding gaps are also likely to be the places where they are hardest hit by climate risk. So these are some of the developing and emerging markets. So some of our global investments will look to solutions in securing food security, securing water purity, and in the more developing emerging markets. So those will also attract our investment.
For us, we feel that property tech is definitely a key vertical to focus on, because in Asia, first of all, Asia is not only the greatest growth engine, but it's also the biggest emitter in the world, accounting for over 50%. And in Asia, because of the rather hot and humid weather, we do use a lot of aircon. So buildings account for over 50% of all emissions. So there is huge need to help decarbonize our buildings with the use of smart energy saving solutions, building management systems, new materials. And as mentioned at the beginning, I do think that going forward, all loans will be green. So for developers to get these loans, they definitely have to invest in these solutions. So when we invest, we always look for impact alongside financial return. So it's important that you invest in solutions that are, first, number one, they have to solve problems, and number two, someone needs to be paying for them.
And you actually mentioned that among your portfolio, the solutions that created impact resulted in much more returns than others.
Yes. So in our portfolio, I was very encouraged to see the fact that actually companies can do well by doing good. So those companies that deliver true social or environmental impact actually outperformed the rest of the portfolio because they are solving real world problems. So that's kind of like my investment motto. I think it's important that the founder really starts with a clear sense of why. What are they trying to solve for the world? And if they can really solve it properly, there's no reason why they cannot succeed.
Pretty much time is up, but I want to give you an opportunity also to have a very, very brief message that you want to leave the audience with before we end the panel.
Back to my existential little message, I think it's important that we all try to make decisions, the most important decisions with our heart, invest with purpose, and embrace purpose at the heart of everything you do, because that's actually the key to not just success, but also true happiness.
And sustainability cannot be achieved by one person. It has to be everybody in it, policymakers, all stakeholders, financiers, startup innovators. So we'll have to be in it together.
Thank you very much. Please give a round of applause for our distinguished guest speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.